a little bit of context before we start. Can you see the screen? So let me know, because I don't have a second screen to confirm.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yes, we do.
So in order to ask questions, we set up a Slido account. Please log in there, ask your questions, also upvote other people's questions, so that we can prioritize the ones that are most interesting and the ones that will answer more doubts in general. But we'll get to those after a brief little round. So this is the SDK team we have in the foundation. There's 7 of us. That includes me and Agustin Mendez, also Leandro, Mateo, Pato, Gonzalo, and Braus. So we're 7 people, all fully dedicated to basically a mission, which is to give content creators and users the best possible experience while they build anything imaginable inside the Decentraland. And well, it is possible to build really great things with the current state of the SDK. As probably most of you know, it's pretty hard. And we are there to try to improve that experience as much as possible, not just to make it possible to make better things, but also to make it easier and more accessible to more and more creators with less effort. So here comes in the SDK 7, which we hope will be a huge step towards that goal. So within this quarter, as a team, we've been taking care of a few metrics and trying to measure our success with this. One of all of these metrics are aligned to having SDK 7 properly launched. So one is having more unique users try out the SDK 7. So far that's 0, but that's just because we haven't launched it properly yet as an alpha. We'll be doing that pretty shortly. At the end of this, I'll share exactly when. Another metric is to document 100% of that, which we're about 85% there. And to migrate at least 35% of our example scenes, the ones that we have in the awesome repository, to the new SDK, so that it's clearer to learn through examples. And we've done so far 11% of the total, so about a third of the ones we proposed to tackle. And we're still doing that. I mean, we're still advancing, and we're pretty confident that we'll get to those results by the end of this quarter. So why is the SDK 7 a big deal? 3 reasons: performance, usability, and portability. I'll give a little bit of overview about each of these. In terms of performance, we believe the main bottleneck has traditionally always been the messaging between the render and the scene, between the render and the kernel, and between different instances of the scenes. So we've been optimizing that a lot and rewriting how that works. I'm not going to go into detail here, but there's already plenty written, both in the reports that have been published in the SDK announcements channel in Discord, and also in the forum. And also we've been publishing some RFC documents if you want to dig into even more technical stuff. So I won't go into further detail there, but the information is out there if you want to check it out. In terms of usability, a bunch of things will be improving. So one, I think the strongest one is the UI. Traditionally, the UI has always been a pain. Now we are creating a brand new UI, which is a lot more like the syntax you might be used to seeing in different HTML-based languages, like for example, what's the word? I sorry, had a React. Sorry, yes, sorry, I had a blockage in my head. So it's a lot like React. So it's going to be a lot more familiar to anyone who has any web dev experience with that. And also, there's going to be a lot more, content and things that you can leverage out there as well. So we writing docs. We have the playground, which is a really great tool for testing and learning by doing. We can go into more depth into that if you want to ask about it. Then a lot of the things we have out there have different layers in complexity. So we're thinking of things as there's a base layer, which is probably very flexible, but not very helpful. And then we create helpers on top of that, which are super simple and straightforward. So if you want to do something simple, stay at the helper layer. If you want to go deeper, there's a lot of depth if you want to go next. So next steps involve multiplayer out of the box. This is a huge thing, and I believe we introduced this in a manifesto we wrote some time back about why we want to do the SDK 7. And also we have the editor coming up, which is also a pretty big deal. So the editor right now is a tool that will basically help in the developer workflow. So it will help remove the need, at this stage, it will help remove the need for using the CLI and the command line at all. So it's based as a Visual Studio Code extension, and through this you can easily run previews, deploy, and all of that functionality you traditionally do through the CLI, but just via a UI in Visual Studio Code, which is a lot friendlier. But the plan for the editor is to take it further and have something that might include a lot of the features that you've seen in the past in the builder, which include dragging and dropping and that kind of thing, but also more advanced stuff that would also allow you to write code if you want to, but it would also allow you to configure things visually via UI, probably more like Unity or other editors that you might be used to. So that is also in the works. And right now we are on stage 1. And we're about to release an alpha together with the SDK 7 for the stage 1 of the editor. So the third thing that makes SDK 7 interesting is portability. And this is because there's also a bit of a change of mindset about how we think about the SDK. We don't want to create just a tool for creating content on the Decentraland. It's a tool for creating metaverse content in general. So we want to think of the SDK as the HTML of the metaverse, not just for the Decentraland. So we want to take inspiration from the internet of old and how it was all based on open standards. It was not walled gardens owned by companies who had their own specifications, which is very much the case for a lot of platforms of today. And we think that that's one of the main values that the Decentraland has to bring to the table, that we're open. So one of our philosophies is we don't want to take Google's old "don't be evil." We want to do a "can't be evil," in the sense that we don't even have the tools to be evil if we wanted to. And Decentraland, in order to get that, we need to be decentralized. Decentraland's architecture has 2 layers. This is a definition that is like way from the white paper. And in this sense, we have a consensus layer, which defines very things that have to do with ownership and very low level considerations. But there also has to be a real-time layer, which involves things happening fast and enabling real-time interaction with other players, which without that you can't really have any kind of true real-time interaction with other players. So in the consensus layer, we have things like the tokens, the land parcels, wearables, emotes, other NFTs, the DAO, and all of that is pretty much decentralized by nature, just for the fact that it is all built upon the blockchain. So in that sense, I think we have this pretty well covered in terms of how decentralized that is. However, when we go into the real-time layer, things are not quite as decentralized because they're not built on the blockchain. They need to be faster. They don't need to be constrained by transactions that might take time and all of that. So player comms, content storage, the rendering engine, global UI, and the SDK. And all of these things are decentralized in their own ways to some extent. I won't go into detail about with each one of these, but basically the SDK is an open standard. And the rendering engine and the global UI, these are a reference implementation. The idea is that if the SDK is HTML, the rendering engine and the global UI are like Internet Explorer. We want there to be other browsers that leverage the same standards and that build ways to visualize the same content built independently of these. Now, the problem we have here is that the SDK and the rendering engine and the UI are all too very much intermingled with each other. We need to separate these. We need to have a separation between the protocol and the implementation of the protocol. And that is a necessary step in order for people to be able to plug in their own things, to be able to switch things around using that protocol. And so a lot of the effort that went into making SDK 7 had to do with that separation, had to do with being able to have a neat delimitation. This is where the SDK protocol starts, and this is where Unity's interpretation of that starts. And thanks to that, we should be able to enable and open the road for a lot of people in the community create their own branches and reinterpretations of things. We have a few. I mean, we have a bunch of community builders who have built really cool things like the VR client, the bird's eye view of the Decentraland, DCL Edit, DCL Studio, etc. But it's been super hard for them. And also that's surely been limiting also how far they can take these projects. Our vision is to have something a lot wider. People remix things, like have different engines, different avatars in different contexts, and have the internet do its thing with Decentraland. So our timeline for releasing these things are as follows. Next Monday, the 28th, we're going to start an alpha, a friends and family alpha, where we'll be inviting everyone who is in the grantee program, everyone who is a trusted developer, and also anyone who's interested to try out both the editor and the SDK 7. And then for the editor, our plan is to release it during December, and the SDK, our plan is to release it during January next year. So that's where we're at. Again, this is the link to the slide of questions. If you have anything you'd like to ask, we're all ears.
All right, Nico. Let's move on to the questions, please. Would you share screen so we go in order from the most voted to the least voted ones? We have 45 minutes and 32 questions. Just for the ease of mind, if we don't make it to answer all the questions, we will have written answers published afterwards, so everybody gets a reply.
Just a quick comment, Agustin and Nico, before we move to the Q&A session. If you are the one who submit the question and want to provide more context or the rationale behind the question, please feel free to raise up your hand or open your mic. The idea of these meetings is supposed to be, since the very beginning, a back and forth between all the members of the community, people who are interested in contributing to the Decentraland code base, and also the Decentraland Foundation members. So we need to start building those bridges, and this is going to be a success only if we all start collaborating together. So please feel free to speak up. Nico, back to you. If you can share your screen, I'm going to be marking the questions as answered on my side.
Aren't I? Oh, sorry. I thought I was sharing already. Sorry about that. Yes. Here we go. Okay. So should we start reading them? Let's start by the most upvoted ones. So one is, when can we use the SDK to mint, publish, and airdrop items and wearables? So that wouldn't be really part of the SDK's scope. We do, however, want to have tools for that. There is a separate project, which is the reward server, which would enable that. The SDK would be just calling that reward server, if you will, but that doesn't really imply any development on the SDK side. It's just calling an API when that's developed, as far as we're designing it at this point. But the when, to be honest, I can't answer the question. That depends on other teams, and I don't know their timelines. We'll have to answer that later. So moving on, yes. When will the latest SDK editor come up? Are you aiming for zero coding developing in the future? If so, when beta test? Well, I believe we kind of answered that just now. So the beta test, or the alpha test rather, will be starting on next week, but that will be a limited version of the editor, which doesn't really, go into zero coding. With the ultimate vision is that, but we're starting like baby steps with making the experience of coding a lot easier and removing some of that friction. But we ultimately do want to get there throughout the lapse of next year. Next question. So the voice chat doesn't always work for every user. Usually when this happens, you can't speak, can't listen either. Are you going to improve the voice chat? Again, I believe this is not quite in the scope of the SDK. It's more probably in the scope of the Explorer, right?
Yes, it is a shared. It is on platform, on SDK, and Explorer. We will definitely pay more attention to the voice chat. If you have any, whomever wrote that, if you have any reproduction steps for us, that will help us debug. Big deal. But it should work 100% of the time, to be honest. So we pay more attention to it.
So next one. Is SDK plan to support loading 3D models from a URL address?
I can take this one.
Sure.
So as Nico was talking about the consensus layer, if we go back in time to the white paper, which aged very well, by the way, there was three main layers in Decentraland. One was the consensus layer, which is the smart contracts and the digital signatures in which we build upon. The second was the content layer, where you deploy the wearables, the scenes, and basically all the content, the emotes. Then there was the interactive layer, which is the peer-to-peer connections and the comms architecture. Lately, we decided to add one last layer, which is the runtime layer to that, and that is where the SDK lives. Why am I saying this? Because the content layer ensures that the content servers have all the information all the time replicated to render the world. And that has very interesting implications, like all the content is hashed, and therefore we can replicate it without asking permission, and we can eventually, if needed, moderate the content. So loading content from a different server that is not a content server will make replicating that content and the availability of that content difficult in detriment of the experience. And also, if needed, it won't be possible to moderate that content because a URL can return one result to one person and one result to a different one. So basically, the short answer is that in the foreseeable future, only the deployed assets will be downloaded.
Moving on. Will there be code modifications required when upgrading project from SDK 6 to SDK 7? Yes. Short answer is there are changes to the syntax. So it will take some work. In some cases, that can be relatively trivial. In some, you might have to rethink how to structure some of it. When we release the alpha next week, we will have a good chunk of our example scenes migrated. So that will be a good place to take inspiration. And we'll try to also create more content to help with that migration as well. So will SDK 7 have an upgrade to eCMA, preferably newer than ES 2018? I believe yes, right?
Yes. The new SDK works with ES 2020. We have maps, sets, generators, and all the lovely features of the newest versions of JavaScript.
So next one. Will we ever get to access to manipulate player controls such as gravity, avatar scale, and or custom not published animations, emotes for game makers? So there are a handful of features here. So one is the animations of the player. That actually is very much in our roadmap, and we want to do that for sure. Not so much like Q1 next year we're planning. Now, gravity, that's definitely something we want to sometime handle, but it's not what the priority is right now, but it's totally possible. I don't see any objections to that. Same for our avatar scale. I don't see why not. It's just not like prioritized over a bunch of things that we have to do or that we identified as important in the short term. So
Nico,
yeah.
Nico, can you zoom in on the questions, because it would be interesting to read the question when you answer.
Oh, so yes, of course. Yes, sorry, I realized it was up. Is that good? I assume that here is a good size, otherwise I can make it even bigger. So next one. In SDK 7, will there be a different way to add custom components? How will it differ? Yes, it will be different. I mean, the syntax will be different. I believe it's like significantly like friendlier, although it does have caveats. But when we release it on Monday, you will have the full documentation on how to do that. And example scenes also would have full documentation there. If anyone wants to add to that, feel welcome to.
I can expand a little bit to not have the huge question mark. So components in the SDK 6 were classes. and classes can have behaviors, functions, methods. And that is not a very correct data-oriented approach. So we are taking a step forward and only declaring the components as schemas that withhold data, and that's it. The syntax is pretty much the same. If you know JSON schema or protocol buffers or something similar to describe data, it maps one-to-one. So nothing very strange to learn. Everything is to have a better ECS approach.
Next one. What is the process for checking? Next one. What is the process for checking in a change when change spans both the Unity, driver, and kernel, and perhaps also the Explorer? This is about external contributions to the project rather than creating content, right?
I think it is related to that change log. Carl, if you're here and you want to provide more details. Otherwise, we are improving our release management process for all the products across Decentraland. And recently, there was new release reports for the renderer. And as we do newer versions of the SDK, we will do as follows. Currently, the platform team is also posting those reports. So basically, we will send the change logs through Discord and GitHub for everyone to read the changes. I think that covers it.
And I guess that also covers the next question, also by Carl, right? Which is, we have a communication protocol. We think it may belong in the comms part of the kernel. What is the best way to get up to speed on this part of the kernel? Unless there's something specific we can share with him to read already?
Yeah, so we are specifying a lot of things into documentation, extracting the information out of the implementation. And there is an ADR, a couple of them actually in the ADA repo, if anyone wants to share the link, talking about the communications protocol. The fact that you mentioned kernel is a little bit strange. Kernel is an implementation detail. The communication protocol is a higher level thing that can be understood without understanding the kernel itself.
Next one. Something jumped the queue, but let's stick to, can SDK Extract Voice speak? I would like to make a robot using voice chat to communicate with visitors, which requires voice data. Right now, we can't. Right now, that information is not available to the running of the scene itself. Should it? It does raise some concerns, right?
I think if we ask permission for the microphone, we should go for it because it is a super interesting feature to have.
Yeah. But it should involve consent of the player, of course.
Yes, of course.
Otherwise, yeah. Actually, I believe that there are a couple of similar questions also later down the line. So let's go to the one that ranked first now, which is it possible to automate the minting of clothes and sell them to the player through the REST API? We make a lot of fashionable items for players. I believe we answered something very similar to this, right? I mean, should be through the reward server. That is a whole initiative that is being taken on by a different team, the services team. But like right now, I mean, right now you can if you basically build your own version of that server, which is not a trivial thing, basically because you have to prevent people abusing and gaming the whole system. But some content creators have done equivalent things.
Miguel?
Yeah, maybe I can elaborate a little bit more. So I think that is not currently possible, but rather through creating a campaign in the rewards service. But we are going to, I think the aim is to be able to make those campaigns auto provided by any user. So let's keep in touch on why we plan for this.
Next question from Fran. Did you see my comments on working from specs on my blog? Are there any plans to start working on that? To be honest, I didn't. Does anyone?
So yes, we believe that that is the way to go forward in regards to the protocol, working from specs, and we are already thinking in ways in which can separate a little bit what is the implementation of Decentraland versus what the protocol is, to have the protocol commoditized a little bit, step by step. And the second one, also from Fram, are there any plans to finish writing the RFCs, especially the scene definitions that are marked as to do? So definitely yes. We do merge some definitions with to-dos, and that is way better than not having them. But it is part of our priorities to always have the documentation up to date. And recently, we've been pushing a lot more focus into the documentation. So expect the RFCs to be more and more complete over time. Nico, back to you.
Yeah, next one. Are there any plans of implementing real-time sound synthesis and deeper functionality for audio in the SDK besides simple sampling? Not in the short term. I mean, it's not something we've seriously discussed. It has come up in the past, but yeah, it's not among our priorities in the short term. Someday maybe. Next one. Can you open the Decentraland Voice Chat for creative use and modification as well, which I believe is pretty close to that as well. Not in the short-term plans. Could be a fun thing to explore later on. I don't see why not. A couple went up in the queue as well. I was mentioned that using external content, not in the content layer, is problematic. But isn't that just the same as using an external API? I was going to take that?
Yes, I will take that one. So extremely simplified, yes, both are API calls or HTTP requests. But in order to make Decentraland work fast, there are multiple processes that optimize the assets on the servers, which end up falling back to the original GLTFs. And if we have to, again, for some reason to protect the IP or people in the world, we need to moderate some content, doing it by hash and controlling the delivery of those assets, and also taking into consideration that we optimize those assets in the servers. Having an API serving the assets will prevent all of that from happening. So for content of the engine, we do use the content layer only.
Next one. Are there any plans of implementing real-time sound synthesis? Oh, sorry, this one is already done. And the next one as well. So the one from Carl. We need to build a multi-land test scene. This was easy before with the kernel test scenes. Is this still possible? Is it documented somewhere? So I'm not exactly sure what this refers to.
I can take it. So we introduced a couple of months ago one feature called Workspaces. It is basically the CLI that you use to preview the scenes, but it also works with multiple scenes at a time. So to all practical means, it is a tiny instance of a content server that holds many projects at a time. You can even create your own wearables on it to also preview the wearables. And of course, you can deploy it anywhere. Thank you, Jimmy. So the functionality is there. It should be fairly well documented. If not, we'll take a look.
No, it should be documented. It's there somewhere, sure. So can the SDK access the user's microphone and depend on the voice chat system? If not any plans, this is pretty much a duplicate of one we answered before, which is not in the short term, but in the future, sure. And currently one has to press and keep pressing T keyboard to talk. Does it exit? I believe this is for the Explorer as well. Really, this is about how the controls are mapped. Someone from the Explorer here who might want to take this one. Otherwise, we can answer it offline in writing.
I think that the feature makes sense.
Mhm,
We'll take it to the Explorer team to address how the UX of it may work and put it into the queue.
Yeah. Not technical questions, but hope you can help. I'm researching the tokenomics and need help. Mod have helped, but still lacking info.
Hello.
Sorry. Bye.
I talked with Paro Roca on chat. He told me you guys could help me. So basically, I'm a tokenomics researcher for an upcoming project, and I now go from token to token, checking everything, cliff period, vesting schedule, vesting period, TG date. I get every single bit of information I can on the token. And so far from your token, it's either a lack of research from me or not being at the right place, searching the right stuff. But basically what I've found so far, I've found two Medium posts from one from Esteban Ordano and another from Ari Malik from 2017, which explain slightly the tokenomics. They explain that how you're gonna distribute the token. So 40% crowd sale, 20% for foundation, 20% team and early contributors, and 20% community and partners. Then it shows how the mana inflation rate will go per year, but then it just shows how you're going to do it. From my understanding, I cannot, from that, make a full vesting schedule from it, releasing all the tokens available. And then I also found the mana vesting contract in terms of the DAO. That one has lots of information in terms of the DAO release. That one's pretty good, but with that I found myself lacking information related to all the other categories in terms of the token release and vesting schedule.
I don't think this is the best forum to discuss about that, because probably nobody here knows about that either. Let's continue offline. Okay.
Yeah, that's all right. I would just ask maybe if you can redirect me to someone who could help me with this. That would be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can see that offline later. Thanks. So the next two are already answered. So next one, how can I render a text image onto a 2D surface like UI image, but it is not hidden while the keyboard U is pressed? I don't know if that is the, I mean.
I can.
Yep.
So basically, everything that is rendered in 2 dimensions is considered UI, and the U button is to hide the UI. And that is there for screenshots, and that is there for a very good reason, which is there are cases in which some scenes put up a billboard that covers all the screen, and you cannot click to hook to the camera to move away from that scene. So if you press the U, all the noise in the screen gets removed, and you can walk away from the parcel. Besides from its cosmetic usage on screenshots.
Yeah, it's a by design thing. I don't think there is a workaround on purpose. So next one, how can I play back a video on a UI image? As I know, UI shape does not support video texture. That's right, yeah. It's not currently supported on UI image. We should. make that supported sometime sooner or later.
It will be used in available on the SDK 7 UI.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. So next one. Will we be able to add custom playable avatars? So I guess this refers to allowing, as a content creator, allowing a player to completely switch its avatar to something different. If so, then it's a feature that makes sense. Currently, you can hack that around, but without full control of what the player's actions are, not so nicely, at least. I mean, right now there is an example in example scenes where you literally switch the avatar to a custom 3D model, and it plays a run animation whenever the player moves. It's very hard to manage when the player is jumping, etc., but you can map different animations to each of the player's actions already. It's been discussed to have another feature to switch the player's wearables and all that, but it's not a priority in the short term. So next question, will you decouple the new scene runtime from the browser? That was the main roadblock when we had in the 2D client.
I'll take it. So the definition of the runtime that makes the scene work in Decentraland is agnostic from the browser. You only need to implement the fetch function and the WebSocket things. But we do have at least 3 different implementations, one for the web workers, one for WebAssembly runtimes, and one for Node.js, which are in our GitHub. So it is fairly decoupled from the browser, the runtime. Then you have the kernel, probably that is the key of the question, which is very tied to the browser APIs. But the scene itself runs in a very slim runtime. I would like
next question.
next one is, I would like to know how to build the Decentraland app for Mac that points to localhost 3000. So there should be a README documentation in the Explorer desktop launcher that explains how to launch the launcher with developer mode. And developer mode allows you to switch all the variables to configure it to run in localhost or with custom catalysts. What it basically does is to append some configuration arguments to the process. And
so if I can ask, I can elaborate. I can build a normal app, and I can actually do development mode and everything like that. But I don't know how to build an app, like an actual app file that actually points to localhost 3000, so that I just have one file, like normally our Decentraland app is built, but then just that points to localhost 3000 instead.
The configuration should be somewhere inside the Explorer launcher. That is the project that creates the Decentraland app. Mateo?
Yes, I see. I've looked through all the documentation, but it's not very elaborate.
Okay, you can check the Explorer desktop, and there are parameters that you can open the actual Explorer desktop to change some parameters, and other one are in the initial scene, and you can change there. And when you want to build the Decentraland.app, it's like building the Unity project just for Mac.
So I mean, there's a build, like you can, so you do an npm run build, and then it does a build, but then I don't know how to get the custom URL to localhost 3000. I mean, I've tried different switches, but I can't get the build to be localhost 3000.
But you should build it with the Unity editor, not with the npm when you want to change the URL.
Aha.
So it's the Unity project of the Explorer desktop that you need to change.
Okay. All right. I'll look
at link in the comments in the chat.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Cool. Next question. How can I get 2 MP4 videos loaded and playing on my scene at the same time? Or click to change. Also, where is this recording posted somewhere? So by design, you can't play 2 videos at the same time, just because it has a very significant impact in performance. And we identified that as being like a really, really damaging thing to players' experiences. When the renderer is trying to constantly draw images from two videos at the same time, it just really, really hurts it. Now, one workaround that several content creators have tried, including several foundation events, was to have a single video, but map different sections of that video into different screens. So effectively, it looks like two screens, but it's really streaming all from one same image texture. And that does, like, even though it looks trivially the same, it really does impact performance very differently. You can have a lot of screens with the same video, but you can have many different videos at the same time. So clicking to change, I guess, should be easy to implement as part of the scene's code. I mean, you can have two different video textures and change between one and the other. It is not to have two being rendered at the same time. And about the recording of this being posted somewhere, I'm sure it is. Does anyone have the link to that or know how you can get that after it's done?
I think it will be published to a GitHub repository. Pablo, Pato?
We are doing three things also. On one side, we're going to be sharing in Discord the presentation, the slides, the recording to this meeting, and also the answers. Pablo can be the best person to also provide light here. So Pablo.
I think it's that's the way. We also emailed the information after the session and when you publish that. So we wait for the recording and the GitHub, and then we spread all the information on Discord, by email, etc.
Cool. Okay, next question. It's difficult to invite people to a live event because they are all directed to different realms. Is there any way to fix that? Who wants to take this one?
I can take it. So the easiest way to gather all the people in one single realm is to share the link with the realm specified in the link. Whenever the Explorer loads, it will honor the specified realm unless it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, it will switch back to other with an algorithm which is also posted in the ADRs. And that's basically the best solution is to share the link. Otherwise, it will try to load the balance between different realms.
Next question. Is there a way to grant access to certain areas only to those owning a specific token? Yes, actually, I believe there is an example seen in the Awesome repository that does exactly that. And there is a crypto utilities library that also offers simple functions that expose that as well. So next one. Is there a patch note list that is posted whenever new ECS or other updates occur?
Yes. So we started doing that first on the catalyst a couple of months ago. We're now doing it for the renderer, and we will do that from the SDK end. We did it in the past, but since we've been focusing a lot on the new SDK 7, there haven't been many new releases. Although, if you want to check the old change list, it is here. We will do a better job communicating the changes on Discord also, to not requiring going in there.
So next one. When a new component is developed by a community member, is there a process for getting the new component approved?
Carl, are you there?
Yeah, is there a process for getting it approved for inclusion in the SDK?
That's a very interesting question. So there are two kinds of components. There are the renderer components, which are broadcasted to the renderer to create something visual or behavioral in the engine, and there are user-defined components. So for user-defined components, of course, you have all the control, and for renderer components, there haven't been any suggestion yet. So it would be very interesting to come up with a process to suggest that. WebRTC video streaming. Okay. So doing a mental experiment. WebRTC. Okay, let's continue this offline. This is my my Discord.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll contact you. Yeah, great.
So moving on, what would you say to those that claim the foundation needs to train the community on taking the reins when the foundation decides it's time for them to fly? Well, this has been the vision of Decentraland from the start, right? I mean, the idea is that eventually the foundation would be leaving the reins to the community. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question.
If the person who asked the question wants to open the mic and share some extra comments, that's going to be amazing. What we're trying to do now, folks, is basically, and I can provide feedback since I am one of the main ones pushing for this initiative to happen. It's extremely hard to balance the priorities in terms of building stuff, documenting stuff, sharing stuff, and educating and learning. So what we have realized is with the unlucky set of priorities that we were handling at the foundation level, we were not dedicating enough time to the community. Of course, it's extremely harsh for a product engineering team to find the right balance. But what we're doing now is opening these opportunities for the community to start asking questions. This is the very beginning, as I was mentioning since we started the meeting. We don't want this to be a one-way communication. This must become a two-way communication, and we need to build a technical community that answer other folks from the community questions and concerns. We're gonna get there in a long, long journey, and we need your collaboration and feedback. So we really want to share. The last we want at the foundation level is basically to concentrate knowledge, because that really affects not our capabilities to build stuff and the reference client, but also it's very overwhelming to see other people struggling with the lack of experience and knowledge. So let's work together on this front. We are opening ADRs. I'm not sure if you check the site, adrs.decentraland.org. We are also making all these questions available for everybody, and we are also creating other spaces. And last but not least, we have the status page, which will provide a better visibility to the community about how things are doing. But super early stage. Stay with us and help us.
So next question. My experience tends to get worse than when I started in May. Why are things getting worse rather than better, even in intervals? So there is a constant ongoing effort from several people in the foundation to improve performance as much as possible. That doesn't mean that occasionally there might be, some bugs or degradations that may have caused that. I believe that like a month ago, there was one particular issue that was now fixed. Maybe that refers to that, hopefully. But things should not be getting worse. And if they are, we care very much about fixing that. I mean, if you have any specific ways to reproduce that, I think there are people in the team who would be very interested in seeing that. So next question, how to avoid animation conflicts? I'm not sure entirely what this refers to. Animations with the same name, and the same model? I'm not really sure. Next question.
Hold, Nico.
Yes.
Before we move to the next question, is Box in this meeting? Because having more context probably will help the rest of the audience. What it means animation conflicts.
Yeah,
Box, speak up, please. You raise your hand. Thank you.
You're on mute. Box board.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, guys. Yeah. So we have some problem that, for example, sometimes the animation just block, sometimes they loop, sometimes they just like, for example, on the jump, it's the one that gives the most issues. So sometimes it jumps, but sometimes it just jumps, but he is still on the idle position. Why this kind of conflicts happen?
We're talking
Yeah.
about the player avatar animations?
No,
Or
no,
it's-
no. So
it's
on the
part of the
avatar
content?
swap, sorry, yeah, on the avatar swap animations.
Mhm.
So sometimes they have these issues where they kind of glitch between each other.
We'd have to look at the specific case, I believe. Might be something to do with messaging and messages getting lost, or we'd have to take a look at it. Sorry. Seems
All right.
kind of specific to the implementation. Okay. All right. So I see Shawnee has been busy now. So have you ever prototyped syncing of two separate scenes together with Canon? Can Canon physics remain consistent over several independent scenes? I haven't tried that. It sounds ambitious, to be honest, given how many messages need to travel. Canon is a physics library, right? And like it involves sending something on every frame. But I don't know,
Nico,
maybe.
I can add some interesting pieces of information about the new SDK now that this is a technical AMA. So we are cooking some ideas about what we call foreign entities. What is a foreign entity? It's an entity that is owned by other part of the Decentraland. Let's say an avatar. An avatar runs in a separate avatar scenes. So for the ones who don't know it, the avatar scenes is indeed a scene. So we could map our internal scenes to those foreign scenes, to those foreign entities to attach things. So let's say you want to attach something to an avatar that is rendered in the scene, or you want to read the position. And potentially, this needs a deeper analysis, but potentially we could also synchronize physics with those foreign entities. Well, that's an interesting piece about the new SDK.
So if I may ask, so the idea would be, would a foreign entity be something like me from my client side driving a car off my property, which is something I do with Canon all the time, or for example, animating a GLTF shape to move outside of the scene? Is that exactly how it works, or am I misinterpreting it?
So let's use a practical example. Let's imagine that the car that you are driving is a portable experience, right? We can talk about that later, but it is a portable experience. So you are wearing your car, okay? Let's assume that there is a barrier, a train barrier in the scene. So eventually you could read the position of the car from the other scene, which is one is a deployed land and the other one is a portable experience. But those are two separate different scenes. I'd love to discuss more about this. So contact me on Discord.
I will. I'm talking to myself, in fact, muted.
So the next question also by Shawnee is, what is the biggest barrier limiting the speed of the platform? How can the DAO help in improving that? Another big one.
I can also take that one. So I will assume that speed as in performance. Okay. So the most limiting factor in the performance right now is that technologically running inside a browser implies that there is only one thread available to do all the rendering, the physics, the communications, and you name it. All the things happen only in one thread, which is considerably better in desktop because we take advantage of multiple cores and multiple threads there because we have the resources the machine resources available for us, not just one browser tab. That is on the technical part. On the content part, if you compare big, well-established games, what they do with the world, for example, in any game, is to render the world as a whole huge optimized thing. So they bake the lights into the models, they bake the textures, they apply different level of details to the trees. So when you go far away from the trees, instead of rendering 1,000 polygons, you are rendering only a billboard. And there are teams of people which are dedicated to the performance of that. In practice, in Decentraland, we only have the parcels and scenes deployed to those parcels, which are very usually non-optimized. And you are not only running one not optimized game, you are running, let's say, 25 games at the same time in your loading radius. And that adds up into the performance a lot.
So primarily the performance is more dependent on client side and the power of the client, as opposed to, let's say, their distance from a Catalyst node or the amount of traffic connecting to it.
And for that part of the performance, let's call it downloading the content and comms, we do have a global CDN on top of the Catalyst network to make it available worldwide, besides having the Catalyst network distributed. And that is a layer that could not exist at all, but we also added it to improve the performance even more. It is not required for the Decentraland to work. It is a CDN layer.
Okay, folks, apologize for chiming in. Time check. We reached the hour at this point, and several people will need to drop. Thank you so much. We received more than 55 questions. This is mind-blowing. It's amazing. We're going to be following up later on. So thanks, Agustin. Thanks, Nico. Thanks, the SDK team members for joining. And Pablo, up to you to close.
Okay, thanks everyone from the foundation. Thanks everyone from the community that came here to listen to us. Thank Agustin, Ferreira, and Yemel for being here too. When we have the recording and the GitHub completed, we will send you on Discord. We will spread the word and the information, and we have the next chapter of the SDK Ask Me Anything in 1 month. So I hope everyone came again to join this space. I think it's very important to have this moment together and to share information for sure. So thank you very much. If someone wants to say something, we have just a minute, but the people that has to go ahead. That's it. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Gianni, you can speak for a minute, but I cannot guarantee that everyone will be here.
1 second. Who should I follow up these questions with? Just from the perspective of prioritization on platform-based priorities from the perspective of the DAO. So we're having a lot of good conversations at the moment with regards to how we're going to be allocating priorities as a community. And I think conversations with the team, obviously with the foundation that's tasked with developing the platform, is important in that regard to understand where we can help and where we can't, just to ensure like there's no double funding or unclarity in that regard. So I'd like to see who's best to follow up with on that regard, primarily on questions on speed, performance, and bug tracking, which is 3 different priorities a lot of community members have brought up in our conversations. You can also forward information afterwards to me, Pablo, if time is too.
Yeah,